Thank you for being with us. I am here tonight with my colleagues, Mary Nelson and David Cleaver Bartholomew. Lee Gagan, unfortunately, is not able to be with us tonight. The recordings of the previous 3 sessions, the slides used, additional resources we have referred to are all available on our website. One of our hopes is that you will be able to use these resources to create conversations in your congregation, that you can organize watch parties virtually or in person and watch some of these programs or snippets of them that you feel are most appropriate. And then hopefully that will catalyze conversations. Feel free to use the slides that we've distributed, and we are available to help you. Don't be afraid to be in touch with us. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on planned giving in 4 easy steps as a way to review and consolidate some of the materials we have been through. When they asked Willie Sutton why he robbed banks, he said that's because that's where the money is. And we should think about where people have money and ways that we're going to inspire generosity that touches each of the pockets of money. So in addition to current income, many people also have saved up money or inherited money or otherwise received assets. And everyone dies and their assets will pass to others, hopefully according to a plan reflecting the owner's values. Most people pledge out of annual income. While people may take assets into account when they are making their annual gifts, we typically use major gift campaigns or capital campaigns to unlock these resources. Appealing to people to share a portion of their estates is usually referred to as planned giving appeals, which I guess is a euphemism that avoids direct reference to death and dying. Newsflash, we are all going to die. I argue that planned giving approaches, like all initiatives to inspire generosity, are ministries. To reiterate some of our main themes, the goal of Stewardship Ministries is not to get people to give more money, but to have them make more faithful choices. As Henry Nouwen puts it, fundraising is always a call to conversion. Now, I realize that I am entering into an ancient debate and taking a side, but I want to affirm that faith is enacted by every choice that we make. Believing in bread does not make us a baker, baking does. Believing in running does not make me a runner, running does. And believing in Christ does not make us a disciple. Living out the love and justice of Jesus is what makes us faithful and disciples. Generosity is a faith practice. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit, and it both reflects our faith and it grows with our faith. So why would anyone consider a planned gift? Well, first of all, the same reasons that they give out of income. One way to frame a planned gift is it's a way to make a perpetual gift, which people can literally do if they make an endowment gift. Now, I sometimes joke that my dream job is to be a philanthropist. And planned giving offers all of us with assets the chance to become philanthropists. What motivates philanthropists? Leaving a legacy, having a positive impact on the world, adding meaning and satisfaction to your life. And I don't want to discount the opportunity for redemption. Maybe you held back from giving more for very noble reasons, not wanting to be a burden on your children due to healthcare costs or other financial distress. And knowing that once that is no longer a concern, you can give more freely and generously. Or maybe you can look back at your life and see at times you were too immersed in our culture of mass consumerism and see this as a way to make good for missed opportunities. I have worked with several people to arrange planned gifts, and all of them, without exception, talk about the satisfaction in it, the recognition of the inherent rightness of what they've done, and that the peace and calmness that comes along with decisions that they make. My wife and I will give away a substantial portion of our assets when we die, and we feel good about this. Now, some people may feel that giving will take away options for them to be the best person they can be now, or that God does not want them to impoverish themselves for the sake of others. Well, once you're dead, self-improvement is no longer an option, and sacrifice will no longer be a burden. There's also practical considerations for making planned gifts. You can reduce taxes, you can increase current income, you can unlock property value. By unlocking property value, I mean illiquid assets. So for instance, you could donate a house that you're living in to your church with terms that allow you to continue to live there until you die. The church could mortgage the property and gain immediate cash while you're living there. And then when you die, they could sell the house and pay off the mortgage and receive whatever additional value there is in the house. These arrangements are complicated, will require legal advice and review. But I just want to throw that out there as an example that people should use their imaginations when they think about what assets that they have and are there creative ways to share them with the church. Many donors feel more comfortable about making planned gifts because many of the gifts that you can make are revocable. You can change your mind. If you put the church in your will and you want to change your mind, you can. Planned giving is not just for the wealthy. Anyone can give away $1 million. The secret is it's not that life is so short, but that you are dead for so long. People don't understand how money grows over time and what the impact can be. So here's one strategy, which is to give $1 million a little by little. If you're able to give $100,000 as a permanent endowment, that conservatively will generate $4,000 per year. After 25 years, that's 100,000. After 250 years, that's $1 million. If you have less or more, it'll take more or less time. The Historic Connecticut Conference has endowments that go back to 1798. So we do have centuries long of income production, and it does add up. Another idea is to let a gift grow and harvest. You can give $100,000 and specify that no spending will happen until it reaches $1 million. Well, at a fairly reasonable rate of return for an investment portfolio, it will take 30 years for $100,000 to become $1 million. It's clear to me that many people have no intuitive understanding or grasp for the difference between linear growth and exponential growth. But when you allow investments you reinvest income, you allow growth to compound, you get accelerating growth. And I work with endowments and restricted gift funds where it's clear that people weren't thinking what was going to happen to their gift in 100 years. Even smaller gifts can have an impact. For $10,000, you can endow a Silver Lake summer camp scholarship. Not every kid has a life-changing experience, but many do. After 20 years, 20 kids, 50 years, 50 kids, you're going to really touch some lives. That's an example of linear growth, by the way. You can pledge to your church forever. I think there are lots of people that can endow a pledge and still provide for their families and support other charities in their estate planning. The average annual pledge in many of our congregations is around $2,000. So endowing this pledge would require $50,000. This probably would not exhaust the estates of many people that can afford to give $2,000 a year. Imagine what would happen if many people did this. Or look at it this way. What if people in your congregation had started doing this 20 years ago and you did not lose the pledges of those people when they died? Do you think your church's financial picture would be stronger and your ministries more impactful? There are lots of ways to make planned gifts. We've talked about bequests. You can name death beneficiaries and financial accounts and retirement accounts, and that's quick, easy, and leads to a speedy distribution of your assets. You can use life insurance policies. You can name the church as the beneficiary, or you can donate the policy to the church. And as we mentioned briefly before, you can donate property to the church. I want to mention life income gifts because many people are not aware of them, and I'm convinced that every year we bury people that would have benefited from them. So this is a way to have your cake and eat it too. The advantage is you're not just going to replicate income you would have received from investments. You're going to have more after-tax income because you can lock in guaranteed higher rates of return, and you can get the benefit of tax deductions. This is especially advantageous if you can give appreciated stock. And something that's very important and reassuring for people is that if you enter into a life income gift arrangement, you can't outlive your income. It will continue for as long as you live. Now, there are rules. I've mentioned the gift is irrevocable, and there are limits on who you can name that qualifies for it and minimum gift amounts, and there are some administrative fees. I just want you to be aware that this exists so that you can think of situations where it might be something some people would be interested in your congregation. You don't have to build the capacity to administer life income gifts on your own. You can get everything you need through the UCC. There is staff. They used to be in Cleveland, now in New York, that will help you navigate the zoo of options. We have a law firm in Boston who will do all the work pro bono, so long as 50% or more of your remainder gift goes to the UCC or UCC-related entity. And we have United Church Funds, which will be the custodian of the assets, distribute income while you're alive, and then distribute the assets to the beneficiaries when you die. Planned giving is a tremendous opportunity and are largely a missed opportunity in our congregations. Right now, churches are the largest single charitable beneficiary of individuals. About a third of giving from living people goes to churches. The bad news is that it was only a generation ago that that number was 50%. But of planned gifts, less than 10% of planned gifts are going to churches. And that's because we're not doing a good job of asking, even though we have a significant advantage in regular contact with people in our congregations. And this is a huge opportunity. As the baby boomer generation passes away, trillions of dollars are going to be exchanged from that generation to the next and to the beneficiaries that they name. So even if we only get a very small sliver of this pie, it can be a very significant source of income. Len Clough worked for the national setting in the UCC for many years in the area of planned giving, and he outlined a simple four-step program for building a successful planned giving ministry. You need a case statement. You need some policies to assure people that you'll be a good steward of the money. You need to identify your prospects, and you need to ask them. And that is absolutely the biggest and most important key to a successful process. We talked about building a case for support in our last session. You need to tailor this to a planned giving request and tell people why you want this money. You're going to want to articulate for people your theology of stewardship and wealth. And you want to emphasize that planned gifts will allow you to extend the mission and ministry of the congregation beyond the resources of living members. You may want to target specific aspects of your mission and ministry for support from planned giving. You may want to make it clear that planned gifts will enable the congregation to sustain its facilities and staffing model that may no longer be sustainable with just living members. When you make a case, you will often present people or solicit gifts in a specific manner, as in a capital campaign. Be careful what you wish for, because the gift instrument will define the terms of the gift. It's always best to seek unrestricted gifts, because an unrestricted gift gives twice. It's the gift of the resource and also the gift to discern what God is calling the church to do in the future. Restrictions that may make sense now may not be appropriate or practical 50 years from now. Whatever donors' restrictions are specified, they're legally enforceable. And if you accept the gift and the restrictions, you're accepting the legal obligation. Any gift solicitation becomes the gift instrument. So if you have a brochure for a capital campaign or a brochure for planned giving that specifies what the money will be used for, you have to do that. So you always want to give yourself some flexibility. So for instance, you've got a target for an amount to raise in a capital campaign or an endowment target that you're building for. You should specify in your materials that any amount in excess of your goal will be an unrestricted gift, because this will give you flexibility with those funds. And it is a motivational tool sometimes to set goals and to help people, ask people to help you to achieve them. Restricted gifts, we would prefer unrestricted gifts ideally, but many people are passionate for specific aspects of the mission and ministry of your church, and allowing them to restrict their support for that aspect of mission could inspire generosity and unlock giving. So we don't want to preclude that. One way to try to find a happy medium is to offer people some broad categories for restricted gifts, worship programs, outreach, so that you put the restrictions, you define what the money will be used for, and invite them to add to the existing fund rather than have them specify a specific restriction on the fund. You need some policies, and you'll need an investment policy. You'll need, if it's an endowment, to talk about how much money you'll spend and what you will spend it on. And you'll want to make sure that the policies reflect the character of the assets, whether it's a true endowment or unrestricted funds functioning as endowment. And if that makes no sense whatsoever to you, make a note. I do workshops on endowment management. We'll provide other resources. There are other resources up on our website that talk about these things. So these first two steps are necessary homework, and don't skip over them. Especially don't skip over the hard work of writing a case statement, because that will make the job of the people asking for the gifts much, much easier. It's hard work, but worth doing. Here is an outline of what you need to include in an investment policy. Here are some drawdown options. Spending policies, an important thing to note is you want to set spending policies in a way that doesn't undermine future generosity. You don't want to create a crutch that undermines individual discipleship and giving in the future. And one way to do that is to make it clear that endowments or planned gifts are for extending mission and ministry beyond the means of active members, and to connect to the why, as we discussed at our last session, Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, and that unlocks passion. For identification of prospects, people usually begin to think about making planned gifts when their children are launched or have been provided for. Adults without children are excellent prospects. I heard at Dartmouth University that 19 of the 20 largest gifts from alumni were from people without children. You want to look for people that are engaged with the congregation and committed to the mission and ministry. Now, many congregations have stories about people that were only tangentially involved or stopped their involvement a long time ago who make gifts to the church. And that's great. It's just hard to identify those people and target them for a conversation. And the last thing you need to do is ask. And I want to be very clear, writing a letter does not count as asking. Making an announcement does not count as asking. Educating is not asking. It may be necessary, but it is not sufficient. Broadcasting, the letters and the announcements are inefficient. It's got a very low yield. What we want to do is have the right person to do the asking and to ask, and figure out the right time, the right place, and the right amount to ask for. The right person will already have made a planned gift. If a committee is soliciting gifts, the committee members will have made gifts as well. You may have to start someplace. If you can't find a lot of people that have already made planned gifts, before you do something more general in the congregation, you have to start with your circle of people. And don't get too hung up on having all the precursors in place, because, as Wayne Gretzky said, 100% of the shots you don't take don't go in. Another option is to create a legacy society. While the gold standard for soliciting gifts is small meetings where one or two people meet with an individual or the individual and their spouse, this is clearly the highest yielding method for asking for major gifts. Sometimes you don't have people that are comfortable and skilled at asking for gifts, and a legacy society is a more structured way of inviting a group of people each year to join the Legacy Society, which means that they have made a planned gift to the church. I will post some material about Legacy Societies on our website if you're interested in learning more about that. Don't forget to thank people. Never overlook the opportunity. Make sure that it's personal. And this is an opportunity. People that are unwilling to be askers should be willing to be thankers. No one has to do everything, but everyone has to do something when it comes to being part of the stewardship team. Be sure to tell stories. People respond to stories. Have a way of recording all gifts and remembering them. Have a way to celebrate gifts from earlier generations, perhaps in an All Saints Day liturgy, where you talk about how the mission and ministry of the church currently is held up by the saints who have participated in the church previously. Quickly, a few words about capital campaigns, another major gift campaign. It's healthy for you to have capital campaigns periodically. I would say as a general guideline, and it is a guideline, every 5 to 10 years. It's because we want to give people the opportunity to be generous out of their assets. It's ways to add to our resources and the energy of our ministries. We should not be afraid of capital campaigns. Capital campaigns are usually important and positive events in the life of a congregation, and you can test this by asking people to recall previous capital campaigns. And a well-conceived and executed capital campaign will not reduce annual giving. There's plenty of empirical data to support this. There's hardly ever a bad time to launch a capital campaign. Don't worry about the state of the economy generally, except if there's active warfare or simmering conflict in your church, it may not be the right moment. And if your pastor is planning to leave, it's also not a good time to launch a capital campaign. Hopefully, you'll solicit gifts and give people a period of time to pay them, fulfill those pledges, and your pastor will be there for the entire time. Consultants are definitely worth it. They cost money, but you will raise more money and cover their fees. You probably only need them for major campaigns. Major is probably more than 2 or 3 times your annual pledging income, but that depends on circumstances. For smaller capital campaigns, there's no secret sauce in capital campaigns. You can buy a planned giving manual from the United Church of Christ, and if you are disciplined about following the manual, you will be successful. We have some additional resources from the National UCC, and there are planned giving organizations. We will add this to our website. And again, I want to pitch that we are posting a lot of information on our stewardship website, and there are other pages on our website with lots of helpful information. So I covered a lot very quickly, and I appreciate your attention. What we would like to do now, I need to stop sharing my screen, hold on. Is, because asking is so important, illustrate what an ask might look like. And so we're going to do a little role play for you about asking for a planned gift. David is going to be the prospect. He's a married man with adult children. His spouse is imagined to be present, but to keep things simple, we're not going to have somebody act that out in this scenario. Mary is going to play 2 parts because Lee is not with us. She is going to play the part of the asker who serves on the planned giving committee of the church and has also made a planned gift herself. She's also miraculously going to be her own wingman. What's the gender neutral term for wingman? Wing person. Chosen because she has also made a planned gift to the church, and she has a connection to David as a longtime member of the church. They've done things together. They've been on a mission trip together. A pastor could play either of these key roles. One advantage in bringing two people is that one can carefully listen and observe while the other is asking. Lee set up the meeting by talking to David and his spouse after church one Sunday, specifically saying that she was a member of the planned giving committee and wanted to talk about the financial future of the church. Lee and Mary have met ahead of time to discuss what they know about David and his spouse and what the best approach would be. Take it away, Lee. You're muted, Mary. Yeah.
I'm muted. David, I want to thank you so much for spending time with us this evening, opening your home to us. That painting above your fireplace is really lovely. I imagine it must have some special meaning to you.
Well, yes, it really does. That's pretty observant of you. It's a watercolor that my aunt did of my grandparents' home. I have so many wonderful memories of gatherings of our family at that home, and I was fortunate enough to inherit it when my aunt passed away.
Families are so important. What a real gift. It's just about the only thing I can think of, family. It's the only thing I can think of that I would say is more important than the church. You know, they're related. Strong families make for strong churches, and strong churches make for strong families. They go together.
Yeah, and I always went to Christmas Eve services with my grandparents and my parents, and I truly cherish those memories.
So I'm the omniscient narrator in the story. Your meeting will start with some social time. Perhaps you'll be offered coffee and cookies. You're not strangers to each other, and you want to make a social connection. Look for clues that will enhance what you already know about the prospects. Mary picked up on the importance of family and connected it to the church.
We'd like to talk with you tonight about making a planned gift to the church. I'm sure you know these gifts will help us to live the love and justice of Jesus in the future, and will help expand our mission and ministry beyond what we can accomplish with future member giving.
So Lee, or Mary, is going to use the case statement that we talked about to highlight the importance and impact of a gift. This will take a few minutes in real life, but should not take much longer than a few minutes.
So David, Lee and I have both made planned gifts to our church. After my children were grown, my spouse and I redid our will to support a number of charities, and none of them are more important to us than our church. So it gives us great satisfaction to think about the good that our gift will do for the church and for the world. We think about the Barclay Endowment at our church and how it's supported youth programming and mission trips like the one that you and I went on. We may not be able to give as much as the Barclays gave, but we know that our gift will make a difference.
So Mary is testifying about her own experience and also building on the mission trip connection.
David, have you ever thought about making a planned gift to the church? Do you know about the different options for planned giving? We're not experts, but we know the basics and we know where to go for answers if you have questions.
Yeah, have we thought about it? Yeah, a little. We know we need to update our wills now that the kids are grown and out of the nest. And have we done anything about it yet? Well, not exactly. We haven't seemed to be able to find the time. You know how that.
Yeah, we found that we had to give ourselves a deadline to make some choices about what we wanted to happen to our assets when we died. In the end, it was such a relief when we got it taken care of. We talked to our children during the process, and we had some really good conversations with them that we might not have had otherwise. And now our kids know what's most important to us, which obviously includes them.
So in a real encounter, the conversation about estate planning might expand to pointing David towards some resources about planned giving. Maybe your church has a planned giving page on their website. If Lee and Mary have had good experiences with estate planners or attorneys, they might share who they have worked with and to help David move ahead. So moving right along.
David and Dina, we really appreciate your steady and generous support of our church. We asked our financial secretary who she thought might be interested and able to make a planned gift, and she said that you would be near the top of the list. There are a lot of different options for giving. You might endow your pledge by making a gift of 25 times your annual pledge, or you might add the same amount to the Barclay Fund. Is one of those options more intriguing to you, or can you imagine another option that would touch your hearts?
So Lee has made a specific ask and did not frame it as a yes/no question. After she made the ask, she stopped talking and started listening. Got to wait for a response.
Well, yeah, and I are going to have to think about this. We tend not to do anything right away. We're not very spontaneous. We'll have to think about it.
Maybe is probably the most frequent response to an ask like this. Whatever the response is, even if you get a flat no, you need to thank the person and make a follow-up plan. If the answer is no, you might ask if no means not now or no means never. Try to leave an opening for future conversations.
You guys, thank you for hearing our invitation and for spending this time with us. Is there anything specific that you need to know that will help you make your decision? Any information you'd like? Is there a time you want us to check back in with you?
Well, yes, there is. We would like to know more about how the endowed pledge would work. How would annual distributions work? And which would be better, an endowment gift or an outright gift with no strings attached?
You know, I'm going to get our treasurer to answer your question about endowment spending. Which one is better is for you to decide. We could do either way, but we're happy to talk more about the advantages and disadvantages of the different kinds of gifts. Thank you so much for meeting with us this evening. Whatever you decide, please know that you are beloved members of this congregation and you will always continue to be so. Our community is enriched in so many ways by both of you.
So remember, we love people for who they are and not for what they have. The request for a planned gift is rooted in a shared passion for the mission and ministry of the congregation. After the meeting, Lee is going to follow up with a handwritten thank you note for the meeting and will reiterate any follow-up items agreed to. Mary could also write a note. Lee and Mary should also debrief and the pastor and let them know about the meeting and anything coming out of the conversation that the pastor needs to know. Meetings like this, you should imagine that they'll take in total 30 to 45 minutes maybe. You do not want them to be too long. You do want to allow for some discussion and real conversation. When I was going through this script, I realized that I forgot to share a resource, which is any of our churches can have a planned giving component to their website. United Church Funds, the national investment arm of the United Church of Christ, will, if you are a participant and invest with them for free, and if not for a modest fee, give you access to a planned giving module for your website. They will help you rebrand it so it looks like it's integrated with your website, not like you're being sent off site to some other organization. And it's a rich site that includes a lot of information and resources for people to look at. I do want to encourage people to ask any questions that they might have as we go along. And while we're waiting for questions, I'm going to invite Mary to tell us a story about a planned gift.
Thank you, Charlie. Charlie mentioned earlier in his presentation that people respond to stories, and I want to share with you my absolute favorite planned giving story. This is the story of Emma Wisenand. And Emma Wisenand was probably a single woman. She's not Mrs. Somebody in this story. So she probably did not have any children to leave her money to. But Emma Wisenand single-handedly saved Plymouth Church in Des Moines, Iowa, with her planned gift. And here's how this goes. Plymouth Church grew very quickly. It was the church in Des Moines that had 4 congregations come together and create one congregation. And so they built this brand new building in the early 1920s. And it was this giant, almost cathedral, huge building that could support all these people and the growth that they expected the church to encounter over the years. And then the Great Depression hit. And the trustees of this church were very worried because the bank started to come calling. They pulled out the mortgage and said, you need to pay us what you owe us. And the trustees of the church didn't have the money. And just at that same time, Emma Wisenand's estate, Emma Wisenand's lawyer, sent a letter to the church saying, just want to let you know, Ms. Wisenand has passed away and you are named as a beneficiary in her estate. We will get back to you with specifics when the courts have figured this all out, but we just want to make sure that you know. So the trustees of the church took this letter to the bank and said, we've got a bequest that is coming. It's going to be coming any day now. Look at this letter. We don't know what it is, but this bequest is going to enable us to pay our mortgage, and we're going to be all caught up and we'll be just fine. We promise. Just hang on. Don't foreclose on us. Please give us a little more time. And the months went by and nobody heard from the lawyers, and the trustees of the church were able to catch up on the mortgage payments and everything was fine. And then the gift from the probate court from Emma Wisenand's estate came, and it was something like $200 in today's money. It was a very small amount of money, relatively speaking. But Emma Wisenand's planned gift to the church saved what is now one of the largest congregations in the United Church of Christ, and one of the strongest givers, and one of the congregations that has a lot of strength both in their conference and across the United Church of Christ, and is a leader in the UCC. Thanks to Emma Wisenand and her generosity and her planned gift, the United Church of Christ as a whole is a lot stronger. That is why Emma Wisenand is my planned giving heroine. That's the end of the story.
That's great, Mary. And I see no questions. In my church, we have a significant endowment. We received a gift of about $500,000 in the 1950s, when $500,000 was a lot of money. It was from a couple who were only tangentially connected to the church, but good friends with Mr. Loomis, who had served as our church treasurer for about 40 years. And apparently Mr. Loomis had spoken with them and encouraged them to remember the church in their will. And it also strengthened the church a great deal. And there were some rough times in my church's history. And I think without the endowment, it might have led to a different outcome. And today I'm pleased that we have a spiritually vital and financially viable church going forward. And we have, over the years, it was an unrestricted gift, but most of the time treated as an endowment. But other times the congregation discerned that it was important to spend some of the money. And we had the flexibility to do that. Marilyn Kendricks has made a comment that I imagine you can read there, but their capital campaign consultant had them go to people and ask what they liked about the church and its ministry, and also ask people what they think needs to change, and then make the ask. Is this a good technique for planned giving requests also? Yes. There's an old saying in fundraising: if you ask for money, you get advice. And if you ask for advice, you get money. So yes, that's a good tool that the consultant suggested to help you maximize giving. Brian comments. Mary, you want to take Brian's comment?
Sure. Brian thanks us for the role-playing exercise. And he says that his church has had a few planned giving events that have been group events. They've had a financial planner come in and talk about the mechanics of leaving a bequest in their will, and the events have been lightly attended. It sounds like we're suggesting a more personal approach, and their church might need to get more missional in their approach to planned giving. I think that sounds right to me, Brian. If your congregation has tried to dip their toes in this water in a group setting, it might be that people would feel more comfortable having these conversations one-on-one. You know, in our scenario, and it's not uncommon to do it this way, Lee and I went to David and Dina's home and asked them in their home. People feel more comfortable having those sorts of intimate conversations in a setting where they're in control. And it may be that, you know, sitting in the parish hall of the church with other families in the church talking about finances is only going to get you so far when it comes to actually getting a commitment from a family and helping them feel able to speak openly.
I have found a tips for asking document that I will add to our website. It's unattributed. I'm not sure where it came from. It is dated because there were no such things as mobile phones when this was written. And it comes from a Commonwealth country because of the spelling of the words. Nevertheless, I found it to contain a lot of useful advice, so we will share that. David, anything that, what happens to restricted gifts when churches close? David, can you respond to that one?
What happens to restricted gifts when churches close? That's going to be a legal question. A lot of that, I believe, Charlie, is going to be related to what the founding documents of those gifts were, are they not?
Yes. Sometimes a donor will specify what might happen to a restriction if a church closes. I do know that if a donor creates an endowment, endowments are immortal, even if congregations are not. And so it is the task of the church when it closes to find a new home for that endowment that will come as close as possible to fulfilling the donor's intentions to support a church. And so under no circumstances can an endowment be unendowed. There's a law governing that. Restricted gifts that could be spent, say it's a gift and it's restricted to music programs. That's not an endowment. All the money could be spent. Again, you have to do the best you can to honor the donor's intention. So look for a way to support music programs in another congregation. You cannot undo a donor restriction. And there are not endowment police or restricted gift police. At least not in Connecticut. There is more enforcement in Massachusetts that I'm just learning about. But what could happen is if somebody believes the church is not following a donor restriction, they can go to the state attorney general and say that the church is abusing their discretion with regard to the implementation of donor restrictions. And the attorney general would then be obliged to look into that.
Right. And also, go ahead, Mary.
Oh, I want to jump in and say, when a congregation does decide to close and they're figuring out what to do with their remaining assets, the first thing they have to do is look at the restrictions on any of those assets and honor that donor intent. And And then the remainder of gifts is up to the discretion of the people who are members of the church to figure out what their priorities are and how they would like to share those monies and pass them on. When a church closes, sometimes the restriction on a gift says, if this church closes, you need to pass this fund on to the United Church of Christ or on to the Southern New England Conference. It is, as Charlie mentioned, it makes a lot of sense to give a restricted gift, like something for a music fund, to another congregation. But the Southern New England Conference can also accept those endowments and help to disperse or manage the funds.
Okay, I was going to say that my experience would be that it would have to also be dependent upon, and then Charlie, you know this because you've worked in Connecticut, that different states have different laws and whatever, because I know in my past experience where we've been able to contact the heirs of the people who made the original gift and then take them through a legal process of repurposing a restricted gift to open it up to do something else. So that was in a different state, however, and I guess that's not a possibility here in Connecticut to contact the heirs of the people who made the original contribution.
I am not an attorney. I've worked with attorneys. Heirs do not have the authority or power to change a donor's restrictions. However, they can object if you make a change that they think is inappropriate and ask for the engagement of the Attorney General. So if you know who the heirs are and you're interested in pursuing other options, it does make sense to contact them and find out if they have any objections to your moving forward. There are ways to petition courts to get a decree that would allow you in some circumstances to change restrictions that are impractical or impossible to observe due to the passage of time. Stuart asks about materials from United Church funds. They have the web module that you can plug into yours that's available. You can visit ucfunds.org and find out about that. If you're looking for general materials describing planned giving methods and educational resources, you can find them on the United Church of Christ website, ucc.org. If you in their search box, enter planned giving, it will take you to several pages of resources. They also have a planned giving manual, which either you can purchase or you can download chapter by chapter. Yep, David's an example of that. He's got a hard copy. It is a good educational resource. My observation is that it has a lot of emphasis on education and not enough emphasis on asking and how to ask effectively to get a high yield from your planned giving ministry. But if you've got technical questions, it's an excellent resource.
Right. And it's $10 available through UCC Resources.
The rules for planned giving are the same everywhere. So for instance, I mentioned life income gifts. The rules are set by the IRS. You can't shop and get a better deal from your church than you could get from the American Heart Association or from your college or university. And because they are the same rules everywhere, it's easy to access materials that you can use. There are plenty of vendors that will help you create planned giving brochures and materials for your church because they have a template and it says put your picture here and do other ways to personalize it, but you can affordably create materials that then you can have then to educate people with. Again, reminding people that education may be necessary, but it's not sufficient to generate a lot of gifts. I see no further questions, and so before I move into a conclusion, any final thoughts, Mary or David, that you'd like to share?
I just want to make sure to put in one more plug for the Stewardship Book Club. We are going to be meeting for our first gathering to discuss Ask, Thank, Tell on Monday, the 17th at 7 p.m. And you can register for that on the Southern New England Conference website. We will be covering the introduction and the first 2 chapters of the book. So we'll be doing this book over the course of 4 weeks, every other Monday, starting next week. So even if you're not able to join us for the first group because you haven't gotten the book yet, go ahead and order the book and sign up to join us. And you could pop in midstream. That would be fine too. But Ask, Thank, Tell, we've been told this one's transformative for congregations. And so we're really excited to delve in and figure out how that might be the case for your church.
And I would just like to say again, Charlie, something that you've kind of brought up is that planned giving is part of a family of ways that people give and can support their church. Okay, there's the annual giving that we give, which you remarked about, pledge and operating income, and then there are capital campaigns. And planned giving is that third component, which can provide for future generations. And to try to think of financial stewardship in that big picture of having all 3 of those, and there are particular ministries, and there is a ministry involved in planned giving, and like you say, helping people to be intentional about what they want to have happen. We all die, and I think you mentioned like 70% of people in America die without a will. Somebody's going to distribute that, and it's better to be proactive about that than have the court decide and the probate court decide where all of your resources go, and especially for churches. To you, Charlie.
The planned giving is a slow and steady, is effective process. People need time to think about gifts. You'll need to circle back. You'll need to remind them. You don't necessarily need a committee that's going to meet monthly to do planned giving, but you do need a group of people that will have a sustained effort over time. So it may be a good place to take some of your emeritus board and committee people who feel that they no longer want a monthly committee meeting assignment, but they still hold the church in their hearts and want to do something that to contribute. And if they have made a planned gift, or you can cultivate a planned gift from them and put them to work on this process, that could be very effective. I want to conclude our evening and our series with a few comments. My position description does not include evangelism for generosity. My work in this area grew out of being invited to be a guest steward in consecrating stewardship programs, invitations to preach that led to workshops and now to webinars. Webinars are a new medium for me, and I know that I have room for growth. My passion for this work has grown. Little of what we have shared with you over the course of these 4 sessions is original thinking. As I said in the beginning, stewardship, the important principles are well understood, but not always well known. So we're trying to share and spread that understanding. Collectively, we in the church world have done a poor job teaching people about stewardship and generosity. We can do a better job, and if we do, it will benefit individuals, congregations, communities, and the whole world. I marvel at the potential for a world saturated in generosity. We can co-create this world with God if we are open to being transformed ourselves. This is what Jesus was talking about in the parable of the sower. And for my final few minutes, I'm going to turn the screen over to Denny Moon, my pastor at South Congregational Church in Granby, for a short riff on the meaning of the parable of the sower, and listen for where wealth is mentioned.
In our story today, the parable of the sower, the seeds, and the soil, Jesus talks about people's receptivity to growth. There were those, Jesus said, who were like a hardened path, not receptive to growth at all. They had an identity consisting of ideas that they had walked over again and again, repeating them so much that their spouse and their friends could predict what was going to come out of their mouths. And though their certainty and their reasoning makes them appear to be open to other ideas and people, there is no way that a seed could take root in the soil of their hearts and grow. So as Jesus said, birds come away, pick up the seed, and fly away with it. Others had the receptivity of shallow soil. That is, they were enthusiastic about a new identity at first. Something was different and it was promising and wasn't that marvelous, but they didn't have the depth to root themselves for the long haul. And they weren't prepared for the struggles of maintaining that identity. And so they dropped that identity and sought a new one, or maybe they took up the old one again. There were others who grew up among thorns, surrendering their identity to the opinions of others or the power and position that wealth could give them. And eventually, these folks would lose their identity altogether and end up being hollow people, for they didn't have an inner identity. You see, there are all these ways that we can appear to be growing and expanding and mature when actually we are guarding against transformation because we fear change. Well, we made it this far the way we are, we think. So why should we take the chance of becoming something else, of growing into something new, of considering other possibilities for our identity? Well, the good news is, friends, that the sower continues to throw the seed on the soil of our lives. The kingdom of heaven, or as the natives call it, the Great Spirit, the movement of life itself, continues to offer us the opportunity to transform, to grow over and over again.
All I can say is amen, and fear not. Be of good courage. Hold fast to that which is good. Go forth and serve God with gladness. Thanks so much for being with us tonight and for this webinar series. And we would appreciate any feedback that you would like to give us. You can email us, and we would look forward to hearing from you. Again, thanks so much for joining us. We hope this has been helpful for you. Bless you on your journey.